Now it is time to get to our team of the week, and that is the Ohio State Buckeyes, number 2 on the field in the CFP, number 4 in the 24/7 Sports Composite Team rankings. They are the team of the week, and I think we can just really thank our guy, JT Tuimoloau. What a performance. We highlighted that on Monday. If you haven't seen that, that is on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. But Drew, the Buckeyes right now, they just kind of do what they do year in and year out. They find themselves within the top 5, one of the better, if not one of the best recruiting programs in the country. When you take a look at this top 5 class that Ryan Day, Mark Pantoni have assembled, what are some of the things that stick out to you immediately?
I mean, it's going to sound obvious, and if you follow college football, this isn't going to be surprising, but I think Ohio State's just doing an excellent job of loading up with elite pass catchers. I go back to that OT7, 7-on-7 event back during the summer months there out in Las Vegas, and really the standout wide receivers were all guys headed to Ohio State. Noah Rogers, Carnell Tate, Brandon Ennis, Jelani Thurman. I mean, Zone 6 isn't going anywhere. I think with the group of pass catchers and skill players that Ohio State has assembled, this is a group where they're going to get off the bus and they're going to be able to score 40 points regardless of who's playing quarterback. And then you take into account that they got Dylan Raiola committed in the 2024 cycle. I like Brock Glenn, the arm they have committed in 2023. I just think the arrow continues to point up for Ohio State on offense. They're not going to miss a beat with this group of pass catchers. And again, that's not surprising with Brian Hartline there. And kids, even in this current landscape, they still take notice of what schools do in the NFL draft. And right now, Ohio State is churning out wide receivers at an elite level.
I think Ryan Day and company know who they are and what they want to do on the recruiting trail more than anybody in the country, and that's saying a lot. I think they are a master at their craft when it comes to the identification and evaluation process and building relationships. And when they know they're out on a top target, they are quick to pivot. So I think they do a really good job. Like I mentioned, the early identification, finding those guys earlier in the process, making contact with them, getting them up to Columbus, whether they be in different parts of the country, whether that be the West Coast footprint, the Texas footprint, where they've had a lot of success, Florida, Georgia as well. They know who they are. They don't try to overextend themselves, and they're very convicted in their evaluations. Drew, you mentioned it earlier in the cycle. We talked about the lack of success that Ohio State had on a summer official visit, which was really an anomaly for that program. They did a really good job bouncing back on that. They brought some guys up, especially on the interior defensive line, a guy like John Walker, who eventually ended up committing to Central Florida. They did a really good job pivoting off of him, locking a guy down like Caden McDonald last night. So at times where you start to question it, I think they really know who they are. They've done a good job assembling this class top to bottom. And like you said, Drew, what Brian Hartline continues to do at the receiver position, I know we have just gotten numb to this, but it's nothing short of amazing of the first round talent that he continues to stockpile. So Ohio State continuing to get it done at the highest level. Certainly a couple big names that they're still after this cycle as well. But Drew, let's get into those pass catchers, as we're going to highlight 3 guys here as the headliners in this class. And I want to start with the guy that we talk a lot about on this show, but the guy that you love. You have been around him for a long time. I don't think there's a better person in this industry to maybe describe who this guy is as a football player, who he is as a competitor, but that is Brandon Ennis from American Heritage.
Yeah, and I think Brandon Ennis is a guy that's going to go in and he's going to play at Ohio State, and we're all going to see him catch passes. But I think it's what we don't see him do on the 14 Saturdays or whatever bowl game days a year that's going to elevate Ohio State. This is a guy who wants to win. He's going to challenge his teammates, and he's going to make everyone better around him. And how do I know this? Well, I've seen him do it for the past 4 years down here in South Florida. He's a kid that was at university school, then True Prep Academy. Now he's at American Heritage Plantation, where last season, due to injury, he had to play quarterback, and he responded well, rushing for over 500 yards. Well, now he's back on the outside. He's been excellent as a senior in 3 games against top 100 teams, according to Max Preps. He's got 13 catches for 215 yards and 3 TDs. I think this is a guy that has one of the highest ceilings out of anyone in the class of 2023. I think he's going to come in, and I think he's going to eat in that offense. And I think he's a perfect guy for Brian Hartline. I think he's one that we as evaluators have almost kind of looked for reasons to pick him apart. Yeah, he's not a 4-4 guy, but he's a 4-5 guy to me. So I really like Brandon Inniss, and I feel convicted about where we have him ranked because he's the real deal.
I think he is one of the best football players in the entire cycle. You kind of slap that label on guys like Caleb Downs, Brandon Inniss. They just do so much. And when you look at him in his junior season, what he had to go through, this was a guy who had to play the quarterback position. They moved him all over the field. He still plays on the defensive side of the ball. He is an alpha. And the guy, Drew, that we have compared him to at the NFL level, and this has kind of been the one guy that we continue to go back to, but is Amon-Ra St. Brown, who played his ball at USC. Drafted in 2021, 4th-round draft pick of the Detroit Lions, and a guy that has certainly outperformed his grade projection. And when you think about Amon-Ra St. Brown and the type of player he was coming out of modern day in California, there was a lot of similarities to a guy like Brandon Inniss, a very competitive temperament and a guy that could do a lot of different things on the football field. So as stacked as that room is that Brian Hartline has in Columbus, I think Brandon Inniss is a guy that will see the field very early at Ohio State. So Brandon Inniss, certainly a guy that we will have our eyes on in the future, and we're very excited to watch. But Drew, his running mate is another guy from the state of Florida, and a guy that, even though he's committed to Ohio State, that hasn't stopped teams like Tennessee from coming after him. But that is Carnell Tate. Big physical receiver, 6'2", hovering around at 180 pounds. And Drew, this guy just continues to get it done. Really like his physical makeup as well as what's between the ears. And Drew, this is a guy that you've kind of championed throughout the evaluation process.
Yeah, and it's funny because I was texting you. I mean, it's been super hard to find a player comparison for Carnell Tate. And what did you toss out? T. Higgins? I think I finally settled on Mike Williams, the former first-round pick out of Clemson, who is now with the LA Chargers. And why Mike Williams? Well, Mike Williams was an excellent body control, an excellent guy that could go up and get the football. And I think that's the two things that Carnell Tate does so well. We always talk about 40-yard dash times, and yeah, Carnell he's got a 4.7 or what is it, a 4.68 on record, but he's also returned kickoffs for touchdowns against elite high school competition there at IMG Academy. I think this guy is a smooth operator. I think he's someone that once he gets to Ohio State, his best football's still ahead of him. I think Brian Hartline can light a fire underneath him, teach him a few different things, and I think he's going to be able to be a go-to type of target for whoever's playing quarterback for the Buckeyes, whether that's Brock Glenn or Dylan Raiola. But I'm a big fan of Carnell Tate. You see him do some things, whether it's in the 7-on-7 setting or in a padded setting there at IMG Academy. You kind of walk away going, wow, all right, that's what makes him what he is. So, yeah, I'm a big fan. Coop, do you have a player comp? I know I just tossed out T. Higgins for you, but anyone that you can relate him to?
Yeah, I think when you toss out those names, people are going to say, well, those guys are 6'4" plus, big bodies in wide frames. And I think Carnell Tate, more from a play style than frame standpoint, probably compares to guys like that. And like you said, Drew, I mean, we had this guy, I think consecutive years at IMG's Pro Day is what they call it, but low 4.7s on the 40. But a guy that really knows and understands how to play the game, understands how to attack leverage, understands how to use his frame as a pass catcher, strong hands at the point of attack, and he is very elusive and dynamic in the open field. He plays bigger than his size at 6'2", so I think that's where some of the comparisons come from. The guy for me was Terrace Marshall out of LSU, who plays that way as well, 2nd-round draft pick of the Carolina Panthers just a couple years ago. So I like Carnell Tate. I think he is a beautiful complement to a guy like Brandon Inniss. And Drew, we talked about it earlier in the process. You put him at Ohio State, you put him at Tennessee. That is a perfect fit for him. Obviously, the line of quarterbacks that they have in Columbus, he's going to have no issue getting touches in that offense. I think he'll develop beautifully at Ohio State. And this is going to be a guy a couple years from now is going to be either a day one or day 2 draft pick. I know me and you can't wait to see what happens with him. But the third guy, we're going to stick on offense here, and Drew, a big projection here, but a big guy that we like, and these are the guys that we like to take a chance on, but that is Jelani Thurman from the state of Georgia, and a guy that's got some genes. He is a freaky athlete and one of Andrew Ivins' freaks on Andrew's annual freak list, but a guy with a basketball background, Drew, that only continues to develop as a pass catcher, has to get better as an inline blocker, but I think it's what he brings to the table as a potential pass catcher down the line that has so many people excited about him.
You know, what's crazy is someone said to me, hey, I don't know how good he is at catching the football. And I had to do a double take because you put on the highlights, you put on the clips from what he did at the Under Armour Future 50 event. And I think he's one of the best pass catchers in the entire cycle. I mean, he's got that basketball background. He understands how to distribute his weight. He understands how to high point a ball. And, you put on the dunk highlights, you put on what he did at OT7. This guy's he's got a monster catch radius. Cooper, I tossed out the player comp, Mike Gesicki, to you when we were at Future 50, and I think you were kind of like rolling your eyes, but I think he's someone that you can flex out in the slot. He's, maybe he gets more wide receiver snaps than he does as a traditional tight end, but he checks off so many different boxes. He also plays a little defense, can get after the quarterback. You mentioned the athletic family there. Dad played in the NFL, mom played it in the WNBA. So I expect him to go to Ohio State and just to be flanked by all those wide receivers. He's going to be a walking mismatch for the Buckeyes, and I'm super excited about him. Your take on him, Coop?
Yeah, Gesicki was a comp. I think Jared Cook was the other guy that kind of stood out to me. You talk about this 6'6 plus frame, a guy that's got a lot of baby weight right now, that's going to play over 245 pounds. I think he's going into the perfect system for him. They're not going to ask him to do too much in line. I think his focus is going to be more as a pass catching tight end. So you think about that, Drew, regardless of the quarterback, whether that's Kyle McCord, Devin Brown, Brock Glenn, Dylan Raiola. Think about the options that they're going to have on the perimeter and in line when you start thinking about guys like Brandon Ennis, Carnell Tate, Jelani Thurman, Bryson Rogers, who we're going to talk about here in a second. I mean, it is an absolute embarrassment of riches of what they have. And Drew, me and you talk about, the new NCAA football game coming back, and we've talked about Texas and the offensive firepower that they're going to have. I mean, Ohio State, you can't go wrong there. So when I pick up the controller the first time, it's probably going to be me and you on the headset, Texas, Ohio State first game there. But Drew, let's get to another part of this segment that we really like, but players that deserve more attention, whether that's nationally, whether they're not included into the top 247. And Ohio State is so deep in this class. They have 13 players in the top 247. That's one of the best in the country right there. But Drew, one of the guys that you think needs to get a little bit more attention in this recruiting process.
Kayin Lee, the cornerback out of the Atlanta area. He was a one-time Georgia commit. After Georgia went through some coaching changes, he opens things back up, ends up committed to the Buckeyes in the summer. To me, I think he is the top slot corner, really. If we're talking pure inside corners in the class of 2023, I think he's the best at that. And we're going to see him at the All-American Bowl in a few months as he wraps up his prep career. But if you read his scouting report, I call him a blue-collar corner. He's a guy that's not afraid to hit, patrol that alley. I think he can be a boundary guy. He's a ball hawk, 7 interceptions last season. A few of those takeaways came in the 3A state title game. I think he is perfect. In the Big Ten, you seem to always run into these, Purdue will have a receiver, Minnesota will have this speedy slot that kind of flies by these defenses. Well, to me, Kayin Lee's the guy. You stick right on him and you don't worry about it. So I think he's not being talked about enough. And I know he's in the top 247, but that was a big take for them. I would not be surprised if he's playing early on as a freshman. I think he has all conference ceiling. I would not be surprised if he merged that as well. So as a slot corner, Kayin Lee, I really like him. You need that these days. Everyone wants these big outside receivers, and they're trying to counter with these small, short guys that can run in space. So Kayin Lee's someone that you can put right there on the inside.
He's a dog. I love his mentality. I love his mentality to the football. He is very physical as a third level defender. I think a guy that would maybe surprise some people, Drew, but just the way he plays the game, he's smart, he's tough, he's instinctive, he's versatile. You can move him all over the place. I think this is going to be a guy that plays sooner rather than later. And Drew, I know you had another guy there that you wanted to give a shout out, a big old physical running back from South Florida as well.
Yeah, we do. Mark Fletcher, Brandon Ennis's teammate there at American Heritage Plantation. We talked so much about the pass catchers on the front end of this, and we will. I know we're going to get to the early signing period, and on signing day, we're going to talk about that receivers class with Bryson Rogers being the fourth guy. But Mark Fletcher, to me, this is a perfect running back for the Big Ten. He's a big downhill runner. He's all of 6'1", 230 pounds. He's having an excellent senior season after dealing with some injuries as a junior, but he knows how to fall forward. So, it seems like every game or every season, there's just this random Ohio State running back that maybe isn't the go-to guy that'll have a big night or a big afternoon. And I think Fletcher can be a change of pace. And if they need him to be a workhorse, he can be a workhorse as well. So excited about Mark Fletcher and his future there in Columbus.
Drew, I'm going to stick on the defensive side of the ball as well in terms of the guy that needs more love. That is Calvin Simpson-Hunt, the former Texas Tech commit to Joey McGuire. Ohio State flipped him earlier this year. I really love this guy. I love his patience at the line of scrimmage, a sub 5'11" corner. I think he can play either side. I also think he can slide inside and be a nickel. I think that's where his home is going to be at the next level. But a 10-6, 700 meter from Calvin Simpson-Hunt plays the game with a lot of patience. Like I said, what I mean by that, he's patient at the line of scrimmage, has really good eye discipline, and I love his versatility as well. So I wouldn't be surprised, another guy to go with Caden Lee that could see the field a little bit sooner in his time in Columbus. I love what they're bringing to that defensive backfield. And the runner-up there, Drew, Bryson Rogers, you mentioned from the state of Florida, the fourth option. We didn't even mention Noah Rogers, who is a top 50 player out of the state of North Carolina. So that room's going to be loaded. I like what he brings to the table. He's a bigger guy that I think can play outside. You can move him inside as well. I think these guys with versatile skill sets, Brian Hartline, Ryan Day, have done a tremendous job finding guys that complement each other in the passing game. And I think we've seen the benefits of that in the past with guys like Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, and what we've seen this year as well. But Drew, if there is one question mark that we have to nitpick in Ohio State's class, what is yours?
Can they hold on to some of these guys? And, it might sound silly at Ohio State in the college football playoff conversation. They don't lose many. And you're right, but they have lost Dejon Mustard Johnson this cycle, Ty Lockwood, a tight end they lost to Alabama. And we talk about silly season. And, we were just on a call and discussing, hey, how much movement do we see? Right now, 88% of the top 247 is committed, but there's still going to be some movement. And I think there's really three recruitments to keep an eye on. And it's three guys we've talked about at length. Brandon Ennis with Miami, he says everything he needs to say about Ohio State. But let's not forget, there was a time when he was committed to Lincoln Riley in Oklahoma, right? And then he had to open things back up once Riley left for USC. He continues to say that Mario Cristobal texts him every morning. Guess who else Mario Cristobal texts every morning? That was Cormani McClain, and we all thought he was going to go to Florida. So I think, can Ohio State keep him committed? I'm going to say yes, probably, but you got to keep an eye on that. And I think the same thing with his teammate Fletcher down here in South Florida, kind of the buzz, that's the one to really keep an eye on. And we know Miami wants to run the ball under Cristobal. And then the last one's Carnell Tate with Tennessee. He's very close with Nico Iamaleava. He was in Knoxville a bunch of times. And there was rumors for that Alabama game, he was actually going to show up in Knoxville for a visit, and he didn't at the last second. But he was tweeting about the Vols' performance. He knows what Jalen Hyatt can do. He knows what that offense is all about. So I think that's my big question. Hey, can they get these guys across the finish line? I would say yes. But you never know. Not in this collective era with the big boosters and what they're able to do. It's something you definitely got to keep an eye on.
Sneaky Miami. We saw it with Cormani McClain. Keep an eye on Mario Cristobal. Still doing work. Brandon Ennis, Mark Fletcher, Drew, you've kind of dropped some breadcrumbs along the way about those guys, Miami's pursuit of those two guys. That is no doubt going to continue all the way until signing day. Drew, I think for me, second level defenders, you saw Ohio State over the summer bring in guys like the likes of Caleb Downs, even though you really wouldn't call him a linebacker, a Swiss Army knife at the second level that you can move around. I think we saw guys like Troy Bowles, Tackett Curtis, Popo Aguirre, all on campus. And for Ohio State to come up over was a little bit of a question mark there. They do end up with a very good linebacker in Arvell Reese, a top 247 standout. But I think that was a position that they made a priority. So those second-level defenders, Drew Keon Keeley still on the board, obviously more of an edge presence, Damon Wilson as well, Mateo Uaongalale. So some big cats still on the board for Ohio State, and that leads me to my next question for you. But if there is one prospect right now that they could finish with, and I think I just mentioned it, who would it be the icing on the cake for Ohio State in the 2023 cycle?
Well, I'm cheating right now because I can see what your answer is. I'm going to go with Damon Wilson, right? The kid out of Venice. We've seen the crystal ball quickly shift over to him. I think he's an elite edge rusher. Obviously, we have him ranked really high there at number 3. But to me, he's kind of what Ohio State's been missing. And we talked about JTT when we got this whole segment started and what he did. But Damon's a completely different prospect. He goes from speed to power to speed. He's got the ankle flexion. He had a monster junior season in Florida's highest classification, 25 quarterback hurries, 15 sacks. Teams have been double teaming him here as a senior. He's also had to deal with that whole hurricane a few months ago, but this guy is the real deal. He was in the top 5 of the freaks list. He can jump and put his chin on the rim. I think if Ohio State gets him or the guy you're going to bring up here, I mean, these are potential first round picks, top 10 picks, guys that resemble the Bosa twins, guys that resemble Chase Young. So for me, it's Damon Wilson.
Yeah, he's a complete freak. The other guy that we're going to bring up here, the number 6 player in the country, the number 1 edge in the country, that is Keon Keeley, and a guy that shot up our boards almost a little less than a year ago, the former Notre Dame commit. And Drew, this seems to me now like an Ohio State-Alabama two-way battle here. In Ohio State, Larry Johnson, defensive line coach with the Buckeyes, has done a fantastic job. It seems like Ohio State is in the thick of it, but you talk about that next great pass rusher off the edge. I mean, whether that's Keon Keeley or Damon Wilson, both of those guys, and obviously we've already minted Keon Keeley as a 5-star, but Damon Wilson in that range as well. And don't be surprised if he ends up in the top 32 when it's all said and done. So no shortage of options there for Ohio State. And Drew, we didn't even mention Mateo Uaongalale as well. So 3 potential program-changing edge presence for Ohio State on the board as they try to work their way to the finish line and finish with one of the best prospects in the country. But Drew, that does it for Ohio State. Any final thoughts before we move on to the 2-minute?
I don't think a lot of people are talking about this with Keon Keeley. If I'm him, that traditional 4-3 front looks a lot more appealing to me than maybe a 3-4. So, we wondered when he would make an announcement. It sounded like it would come after he took that official visit to Alabama a few weeks ago. But I think the longer this thing stretches out, the better news or that increases Ohio State's chances of getting him. And I think that for him, a guy that has it all, finding the right scheme fit might be the biggest thing. So something to marinate on if you're an Ohio State fan.
Ohio State, number 8 in the country, the number 2 ranked Buckeyes, their next 4 games, they go on the road at Northwestern, then they have Indiana on the road at Maryland, and then they come back and they host Michigan. It's going to be a big game this year. Obviously, a lot on the line as both teams are in the top 5 for the college football playoff.